All right, Cram 15. So, chapters 1 and 2, I'm going to admit, are a little bit deep. We're going to go into, philosophy and the whole concept behind moral and ethical behavior and things like that um, might seem a little dry. I will also admit that. But they're important parts to get through in order to get to where we really want to be, which is trying to assess and discuss the whole concept behind ethical behavior in police work. So this chapter talks a lot about philosophy, and it talks a lot about where morals and ethics come from and how we assess those. So bear with me. These are really things that you should be reading in the book. And if you don't have the book, I think this is going to get a little bit tricky. So I would really strongly suggest that if you don't have the book, you get the book. So learning objectives. Whew. Define deontological and teleological ethical systems. Okay? Yeah. So what I'm saying, we're going to go kind of deep into these different types of ethical systems. Talk about virtue, natural law, religion, ethics of care, egoism, all this kind of stuff, which again goes pretty deep, especially for a crim class. But again, it's important to assess and address all these things when we're talking about ethics. So, the systematic ordering of moral principles. This is our ethical systems, form the basis for moral judgments. So, let's just throw out there an example, and in your book throws out this example, which I think is really kind of breaks it down to an easier way to address this. Most of us would agree with the statement that children should be taken care of or looked after. I think the book says specifically, children should be looked after. I guess the question then is, why? Is there any reason, is there any circumstance when children should be left alone? And what we're trying to do here is kind of delve deeper into the whole concept of, is it morally wrong to not take care of a child? Here comes my dog is getting on me. Get off me, dude. I love you. Get off me. Move. Hi. So why is it important that people look after their own children? Well, because it benefits all of us if we watch out for our children. It's a parent's duty, responsibility to watch after their children. There's always that deeper question of why. Do we, as human beings, possess a moral common sense? Do you, as just a human being yourself, I guess ask yourself this question, do you have a moral common sense? Is something that's immoral to me immoral to you? Marijuana is such a great question. Is smoking marijuana immoral? It is a really interesting question because probably 100 years ago, let's say 50 years ago, you might have said yes. Today, you might say no, it's legal. Why is it legal now? Why is it not moral? Why was it not moral 50 years ago, but it is moral now? Do our ethical systems change? Should they? Whew, that's a bunch of crazy stuff to throw at you, right? Okay. What is a good person? This is the ethics of virtue. It asks that question. Is a good person just someone who takes care of themselves? Is a good person someone who takes care of others? Is a good person someone that minds their own business and does the right thing? Is a good person someone that cares for other people? So the roots of this system are the work of Aristotle. And basically, it was his belief that one should not be, he called it the principle of the golden mean, one should not err toward excess nor deficiency. So basically, what he's saying there is that we all should live the life of a happy medium, somewhere in the middle. You shouldn't be too proud or too meager. You shouldn't be too brave or too what's the word I'm looking for that's opposite of brave? Too why will that word not, you know what I mean, the opposite of brave. I want to say weak, but that's not the word that I am looking for. But you shouldn't be too wealthy or too poor. You shouldn't be too successful or too unsuccessful. Aristotle's belief was that really you should live your life right in the middle, somewhere right in the middle. He also believed that the virtues of a good person included thriftiness, temperance, humility, industriousness, and honesty. Those of you who certainly went to Clovis Unified Schools, I'm not sure if Fresno Unified or Central Unified Schools did the same thing. You all knew the 6 pillars of character. Fresno Unified, Fresno County Office of Ed schools all had those too. Had the 6 pillars of character: trustworthiness, respect, responsibility, fairness, caring, and citizenship. These were all things that are ethics, values, virtues of a good person. They assume that good people will make good decisions and that there's little help for people facing dilemmas. Think about dilemmas. Think about a situation that you've been in before where you were given a situation or a scenario when you knew what the right decision was, but you also knew that making the right decision was going to impact either your job or a relationship with somebody, or maybe go against one of those pillars of character. And I can tell you, I've been in a situation at work before where basically I'm being told by my boss to do something that I personally don't believe in. But my boss says, this is what you're doing because this is what we're telling you to do. And in my own gut, my own heart, my own mind, as a good person, I like to usually think of myself as a decent human being. Yeah, sometimes I'm sure whatever. My gut was telling me this was not the right thing to do, but my boss was telling me this is what you're going to do. Think about those kinds of situations that you're in sometimes. And how do you move past those? How do you continue to think of yourself as a good person when you know you have to make a decision that doesn't necessarily align with your values and virtues, as we say? It's hard when you're facing those types of dilemmas. And trust me, as a police officer, there will be times when you're going to have to make decisions that you might not necessarily believe in, but you have no option because that's your job. So moving on to natural law, the idea is that certain things are simply by nature good or bad. Things like murder. Most people would say, in general, murder is bad. Has nothing to do with God, religion, anything other than nature itself. Murder is bad. Killing someone is bad. Pursuit of knowledge is something that is encouraged by natural law so that we could continue to exist. Morality is something that is encouraged by natural law because, again, in order to continue to exist by way of nature, morality is something that keeps us from all killing each other, right? Natural rights are rights that everybody has purely by virtue of being alive. How can we determine what natural law is versus man-made law? And what are the natural laws of morality? Interesting questions. Okay, again, we're delving super deep in here. Man-made law. Drug use. Let's say using opiates. Man-made law. Okay, that is a man-made law. Opium is something that grows naturally in the world. So that would not be a natural law. If something were to exist naturally in our society and we were to ingest it, it wouldn't necessarily be against natural law. However, we've seen how people can react after they ingest it. So man-made law says we shouldn't use that because we act crazy when we do that. But what are the natural laws of morality? Good question. They might differ amongst different people. So a lot of people are kept in check and get their religious or moral and ethical compass by way of religion. I don't know about you guys, but I know that I was raised in the Catholic Church. Not actually physically in the church, but I went to Catholic school for a short period of time. As a child, I did not miss Sunday Mass, did my first communion, confirmation, all that kind of stuff. We were pretty much hardcore Catholics. So a lot of the way I grew up and what I saw as good, evil, moral, immoral, ethical, unethical, I learned that because I was taught a certain religious belief. A lot of you probably were taught the same type of thing. I think Catholicism is pretty popular in our area here in the Central Valley. But whatever other religion you could have been, there are a lot of things, ethical and moral things that we are taught in our churches. Why is that? I don't know. Is it something to keep us in check? I don't know. Is it truly something that God wants us to, a way that God wants us to live? It could be. But a lot of us are taught to live a certain way because of our religious backgrounds. And your book breaks down a lot of different, where is it? I think it's on page 30, the religious ethics, and basically shows different ways in which God, in whichever way that particular religion describes it, how God sees things and how God encourages people to behave. Like in Christianity, do unto others as you would have them do unto you. And they have Confucianism, Buddhism, Judaism. There's a bunch of Hinduism. They have a bunch of these listed in the book. Interesting kind of philosophies that each of these religions have listed, like I said, in your book. And it's really, really interesting. Some of those will basically describe how the individual conscience should guide the ethical behavior, religious authorities, and the Holy Scriptures. So, interesting. Okay, ethical formalism is listed on page 33, and I'm going to read the definition in your book. It is defined as the ethical system espoused by Kant that focuses on duty holds that the only thing truly good is a good will, and that what is good is that which conforms to the categorical imperative. Whew. Okay, that's pretty deep. So basically what they're focusing on is that every person has a duty to do good, okay? And to always have basically a good heart and good intentions. And ultimately what they're saying here is it doesn't matter what the outcome of the good intentions are, as long as the intentions of the act are good. Okay, does that make sense? So I'm going to read you the definition of the deontological ethical system too. The study of the duty or moral obligation, emphasizing the intent of the actor as the element of morality without regard to the consequence of the acts. So basically, we're talking about an act of goodwill. Again, the intent is what is important. Okay, more of the principles of Kant's theory. Act only on that maxim through which you can, at the same time that it should become a universal law. Holy cow. Okay, basically what they're trying to say here, if you do something, it should be assumed that everyone should be able to do it. Like if you were to cheat on an exam, then that means that everyone should be able to cheat on an exam. So whatever it is that you think works for you, if it's something that works for you in whatever time it is, that whatever that decision is that you're making, that decision should be made for everybody all the time. Act in such a way that you always treat humanity, whether in your own person or that of any other, never as simply a means, but always at the same time as an end. Ultimately, don't use people. Do not use someone simply as a means to an end. Don't be nice to someone just so you can use them for something, for a ride to school. I don't know. Act as if you were, through your maxims, a lawmaking member of the kingdom's end, sorry. So again, if you are making decisions on your own behalf, you have to consider, according to Kant, that whatever rules you decide are suitable for you are suitable for the entire kingdom, for everyone. Kind of goes back to that first one. I know this is kind of, yeah. So, are there some issues with this? Yes. What if you have someone like Adolf Hitler? Are there exceptions to the rules? Adolf Hitler was a bad person. Is it reasonable to kill Adolf Hitler and maybe not kill anybody else? Maybe. So this whole concept, Kant's ideas, don't necessarily take into consideration extreme circumstances. All right, utilitarianism, teleological ethical system. What is good is determined by the consequence of the action. That one sounds tricky because there's a lot of things that people can do and get away with. So what's the consequence for their action, right? So Jeremy Bentham, he is a guy that you will hear about a lot in the world of criminology, but he was a major proponent of this concept. But there are criticisms because all pleasures or benefits are not of equal value. And it also presumes that one can predict the consequence of actions. So there might be some things that you could do and get away with, and there are also some things that you could do and not get away with. And there's also little concern for individual rights. And I'm going to kind of speak through this. I didn't mean to do that. All right, then we'll move on to the ethics of care based on human relationships and need. This is described as more of a feminine type of a concept. And the solutions might be the same, but it definitely would, they do ask different types of questions, kind of more like, why do people do things? And this is a concept that is much more ingrained in things like the restorative justice movement, which is really popular right now. Certainly in the Central Valley, we have a restorative justice program in the Fresno area. It's run by Fresno Pacific University, where you'll have a victim and an offender that will work together. This is a voluntary program with a mediator, and ultimately they will discuss the criminal behavior. The victim will tell the offender, how the offense made them feel. The offender will tell the victim why they did it and maybe explain what they were feeling at the time. The two get a chance to talk, hopefully repair their relationships, and move forward. And typically this is without court involvement. So building and repairing relationships in the community is much more what restorative justice is about. And again, ethics of care, we're talking much more about relationships and building and maintaining and repairing relationships. So that's much more what the ethics of care is dealing with: connectedness, caring, and mindfulness in the peacemaking process. And they actually have a program, peacemaking and mediation, I believe is a major in grad school at Fresno Pacific University. This one's actually kind of interesting. Egoism. Is it an ethical system or not? And egoism is exactly what it sounds like. Basically, worrying, considering living for yourself. Egoism postulates that what's good for one's survival and personal happiness is moral. Psychological egoism basically is the thought that it's in our nature really to only worry about ourselves. I can kind of see that, but anyways. And then enlightened egoism is basically the concept that the only reason we kind of even try to help other people is because we know we might need their help in the long run. I know that. Does that sound bad? I don't know. But it is rejected by most philosophers because they say basically it's not ethical to only care about yourself. So I don't know. Interesting consideration. So some other methods are listed on, these are on page 41. Imperative principle directs that a decision maker act according to a specific and unbending rule. Utilitarian principle determines the ethics of conduct by the good or bad consequence, and we talked about that. And the generalization principle is what would happen if all similar persons acted this way under similar circumstances. And to keep moving forward, these are some other methods. And again, this is all continued in your book. Does the action violate another person's constitutional rights? These are questions that police officers should be considering when they are making ethical decisions, including the right of due process. Does the action involve treating another person only as a means to an end? Is the action illegal? Do you predict that your action will produce more bad than good for all persons affected? And does the action violate department procedure or professional duty? So these are other things that would help in making ethical decisions. Identify the facts, identify relevant values and concepts, identify all possible moral dilemmas for each party involved. And this one's a tough one sometimes because even the free cup of coffee, there might have been some things that you didn't think about when I mentioned getting a free cup of coffee. Decide what the most immediate moral or ethical issue is and resolve the issue. Ethical relativism and cultural relativism. If people believe different things are good or bad, how can you define what is good? Who is to say which society is right? We live in an area with a lot of different, we live in a very diverse area for cultural relativism. Who is to say whose culture is right? This is another thing that's very interesting in our valley specifically. Learning about other cultures, what is ethically and morally right and wrong in all those is very important. Fatal flaw relativism. Why should anyone obey their culture norms since they may be right in another place or another time? If you're in a different country, something might be acceptable. It's not acceptable here. And I like this one. Absolutism. Is it always wrong to lie? Should you never lie? Guys, what if your girlfriend asks if her butt looks big? I know. Should you ever lie? I don't know. Universalism. If you want to do something, you should be able to agree that everyone should be able to do it. Situational ethics. Are there different, are certain things okay in certain situations? Is it okay to have a glass of wine at 7 in the evening in my living room versus at 7 in the morning in my classroom? Right? Here's some discussion questions. You don't have to answer them, but just think about it. If you believe stealing is wrong, why? Under which ethical system would you believe assassinating a tyrant like Adolf Hitler, OBL, would be moral? Is it moral or immoral to kill these guys? That's it. Finally. Sorry guys, I know it was kind of long and boring.